Stuff popping in, that's great. Coming in and coming in everywhere.
I feel like we're working a telethon, you know, where the clicker keeps moving, except it's all audio.
Right.
Audio and initials.
Gives Hollywood Squares a new meaning.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
Oops.
304.
Whose number is now being broadcast to the world?
I know. I know. Everybody write that down.
Okay, we're here.
Great. You're the center of this, Jim, at least on my Hollywood Square.
Oh, I'm not.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I don't want to be in the center. That's
You are right there.
Charles Nelson Riley.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody's old enough on the call to remember the
Yeah. Right.
Wally Cox.
Oh, yeah. Somebody remembers him and George. That's great.
Oh my God, George Goebel. Yay! I feel better.
Maggie, do you think we've let most everybody in? Or
Yep, it looks like we have probably about everybody we're going to get at this point, and we will be recording this session, so anybody who can't join us today is going to be able to watch it later.
that's great. And Maggie McDonald is the PEC very wonderful program coordinator, and she and V, our wonderful graduate assistant, are manning the technology here. Would you like to add some tips, Maggie, to the fact that they're going to register?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll go ahead and do that now. If anybody has a question throughout the session, you can just click, there's a little button down in the toolbar, sort of at the middle bottom of the screen, that's shaped like a little chat bubble, and it says show conversation. If you click on that, then you'll be taken to the chat, and you can enter your questions in the chat as we go through our overview of the RFP and resource guide, just so we don't have to stop the discussion to take questions. We'll be able to keep track of your questions as they come in. And we also request that you put your name, affiliation, and if you're okay with it, your email in the chat box, just so we have a record of everybody who's here. We tried to keep an accurate RSVP count, but I know some people might have popped in who didn't RSVP first. So we'd be really grateful if you could do that, so we're in touch with all of you after this.
And Maggie, we have quite a bit of time at the end allotted for question and answer, but we'll go ahead and let people enter them in the chat room, hopefully. But if somebody wants to raise their hand and do it, we'll try to be aware of that too. So I see everybody registering, and thank you, Maggie and V. I'd like to welcome everybody to our Sparking Early Literacy Benedum West Virginia Public Education Collaborative Partnership Grant. And it's like I think of us as these people that are on the technical assistance team as like children that are anticipating Christmas. That's how we've been to find out who would be interested in applying. You know how when you work on something like the RFP and the resource guide and the concept for so long, and then you're just so excited to see the applicants. So we were really happy when we saw the numerous people that signed up, 80, and then we have another technical assistance coming up December 2nd that we have several registered for. So we're thrilled to have all of you and really anxious to hear from you and to be able to help. We have a wonderful technical assistance team with us today, and I'll introduce them just briefly, and then each one will be speaking to you. First, we have Dr. Jim DeNova, and he is the vice president of the Benedum Foundation. And I think so many of you, I know when you were registering, said, oh, I know Jim. Everybody knows Jim. And everybody knows him because he's been such a wonderful friend to education in West Virginia. And he's certainly a champion of early literacy back in the days when I was even in the classroom. I remember the work that he did, and certainly has continued on. And Jim's an expert in many other things too, besides early literacy, such as STEM and workforce and all things education and beyond. So we're thrilled to have him, and really thank the Benedum Foundation for making this one of their 75th anniversary focuses. So you'll hear more from him later. But I'd also like to introduce Monica Delamay. And she's the director of the Office of Early and Elementary Learning at the West Virginia Department of Ed. And many more of you probably know her because she oversees the whole department, it looks like to me. But she definitely, everything to do with West Virginia's comprehensive approach to early and elementary learning systems, pre-K through 5. And this includes a great focus on school readiness and West Virginia Universal Pre-K, the transformational system of support, the literacy teams, the grade through 5 executive council, and I could go on and on. But what we know about Monica is she's always there ready to educate us, inform us, but mainly to help. And she's really has a servant's heart, as we've seen through COVID, her and the whole department. So we're thrilled to have her as part of this team that will be helping all of you. And then we have Allison Dagan from WVU. She's a professor in the College of Education and Human Services at WVU, and she's also the program coordinator for Early Literacy Reading Specialist Program. So she has been instrumental in producing this RFP and resource guide, along with Chrissy Glantz, her doctoral student. And she's just been such a wonderful resource to us. And she has many other varied interests at the university and things she's involved in, like heading the Women's Leadership Institute. So we're really excited to have her with us as well. And I already introduced Maggie and V, but we couldn't do anything without them, and really appreciate them and the research that they've done in early literacy for this RFP and resource guide, and the logistics and technical that you see today, the behind the scenes things, but you see their work in everything. So I just want to say just a quick word about this Sparking Early Literacy and how we know that West Virginia needs to improve literacy, as does the whole nation. And one of the statistics that we have that we pull out is that only 44% of West Virginia's third grade students read at proficiency level during the 2019-20 year. And this is a nationwide problem, but we're in West Virginia and we want to make it we want to solve that problem. And we plan to do that with innovation, your ideas. And I know West Virginia educators and nonprofit and community organizations have such creative, innovative ideas. Back when I was at the department and I led innovation zones, I got a taste of that. And you've continued on. So we welcome you here today. And the old cliche that you hate to hear, we're here to help. We mean that. We really mean that. And we'll talk more about that later. But I'd like to turn it over right now to Dr. Jim DeNova.
Thank you, Donna. Well, first of all, let me thank everyone for participating today. I think this is going to be a really interesting venture for all of us. And it really started with our interest at the Benedum Foundation and figuring out what is really behind West Virginia's rate of literacy, both in early childhood and in elementary grades. Because Donna mentioned the state average is not great, but averages mask disparity. And if you look closely, there are very poor elementary schools in very rural parts of the state that have exceptional reading levels, others not so good. So there's wide variation in what is happening in the community and what is happening in different schools. So we thought that we should try to look at where there are specific problems in the progression of literacy, where there are certain pockets in the state geographically where the student populations and the communities need more help around early literacy, whether we look at certain populations of students to see where we can be a little more laser focused on what's not working so well, but also what is working well. So we decided to fashion a request for proposals that would particularly target some of those disparities in learning outcomes for the early grades. And I want to be really clear about something. There is a lot of great work going on in West Virginia around early literacy. From the Campaign for Grade Level Literacy to the Imagination Library, there is a lot of work going on. And the ultimate goal of learning to read so students can read to learn in successive grades is without argument, is without debate. So that's one of the greatest things about this campaign is nobody has to argue about the objective. What we need to do is sort of reverse engineer where we can target some investments to raise the level of those in greatest need. So we turned to the Public Ed Collaborative because it is a really unique consortium of K-12, higher ed, universities and institutions across the state of West Virginia, several from Pennsylvania, that can really look at collective response to specific learning challenges. So in order to craft this RFP, and because we wanted to look at specific targeted areas of need, but also with some targeted strategies to address those needs, PEC was able to put together what I consider a phenomenal resource guide to accompany the request for proposals. And I find this document as carrying incredible educational value beyond this particular venture of soliciting proposals and making grants. And what's really meaningful to me is the fact that there's a combination of disaggregated data so that we can look at maps and find out at the school level, at the community level, where reading proficiency is excelling and where it really needs to be accelerated. And it also includes resource guides for best practices, directives in terms of what kind of evaluation match what kind of program. So I'm hoping all of you had a chance to review the materials that are on the PEC site. But I just wanted to emphasize the fact that the Benedum Foundation will be soliciting proposals through PEC. And we are looking for specific kinds of interventions that match certain kind of problems. And by way of example, Monica Delamea has been an incredible resource in giving us both demographic data sets, but also longitudinal data sets. So one example we've learned from the NEAR study that was conducted by the Department of Education is readers in pre-K often excel beyond their peers. But in kindergarten and first grade, those reading gains begin to dissipate. So here we have a unique feature where student populations, those who benefit from pre-K, make strides that are not sustained. So what is happening in the classroom at the kindergarten and first grade level that's different from what happens at the pre-K level? Are there lessons learned from pre-K that can transition into K and 1 to help sustain that growth model and help continue to accelerate those students on the pathway to higher levels of literacy? That's an example. It's just the kind of targeted problem, and we're looking for targeted solutions. And the resource guide and the RFP, we're hoping, will help those of you who are working in different levels of early childhood look for some areas where there might be opportunities to take what's really working very well in West Virginia. How could it be applied to areas in greater need? So we're looking for dissemination of really good practices that are on the ground, good practices from other communities, and helping to raise all communities and all student groups. So I should note, we're looking at a round of grants to be made in the spring of 2021, and hopefully another round of grants the following year. So Allie, I think, is going to talk in more detail about the actual RFP, but I just want to note that the round of grants we're making, our first round, are going to be at $50,000 per project. That's the cap. And we're really looking for a set of very innovative programs that address very specific problems. And hopefully we'll be able to look at a second round to either build on what we've learned in that first round or look at new ventures in the second year. But ultimately, we want to be able to track specific interventions that, while in practice in certain parts of West Virginia, might be scaled. So we want to look to the education policy makers at the end of the day to be able to look at what we've learned through these various demonstrations of unique programs addressing unique problems. So I will stop talking now. Allie will walk through some of the particulars, but I'm also hoping, please, 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 ask questions. We want this to be more of a Q&A and a dialogue session than a presentation, because all the information you need to know is on the website. What we need to do is, clarify and answer some unanticipated questions. That would be most helpful to me. I'll stop talking now.
Thank you very much, Jim. That was wonderful. Monica, we'd like to call on you now to talk about how this initiative and this grant opportunity align with what the department is doing. And as Jim said, you've certainly been very helpful, and we couldn't have done any of it without you. So turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much, Donna. Thank you, Jim, Allie, the whole team who've helped out. And thanks to all of you for being here today on this TA meeting. So I'll be brief. I just want to let you all know, for those of you who may not know, that we have a campaign for grade level literacy in place in West Virginia. We're working to make great strides. We have a lot of challenges, but we're really looking at a comprehensive approach that begins at birth. So there are a few areas that you will find on the RFP that you would need to apply under for funding, and you'll learn more about that in a little bit, and then get to ask questions certainly during this process, or at any time. You can ask questions after the meeting as well. But the first area is school readiness, and that's really for those programs serving children birth through first grade, even, because in the state of West Virginia, school readiness is defined as the programs or support from and to the programs leading up to children as they enter first grade. So our universal pre-K, our kindergarten programs, our child care, family child care, in-home family visitation, library systems. I mean, there are so many different organizations that fall under that umbrella. Birth to 3, we have such a a rich and rigorous early childhood system in our state. We're very fortunate in that, and families benefit from that, and ultimately children benefit from that. The second area is classroom instruction, high quality classroom instruction, and really looking at what Dr. DeNova was talking about as far as the innovations that might result in transformative practices that yield academic achievement. We know that can happen in school readiness as well. We know there are innovations to be to be fleshed out more and to be looked at. That it's probably the most obvious way to look at it through the lens in that classroom instructional vein, though. And you'll learn more about that from the RFP if you've not, or the resource guide, excuse me, if you've not had a chance to look through that yet. The third area is extended learning, and that's critically important because we know that that could include before and after school programs, summer learning programs. There are a lot of different places that children have opportunities to learn other than school, and certainly other than at home at times. So if you are working with children in that capacity, think about how you might choose to apply under that area. Those areas all align exactly with our campaign for grade level reading at the Department of Education, and that each county has been working toward for the past several years. And before we did this with grade level reading, to look at a birth through third grade approach, the state focused on third grade and eighth grade. That's way too late. It's way too late to get started. Birth is where we get started with early literacy and with expanding that love of learning and that love of reading. And we're really excited about this opportunity to give some of you all the chance to look at how transformative practices can be showcased and reflected in your programs. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood that this is very much so in line with what your county early literacy teams are working toward, and the components are matched up very, very well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Monica. It's really important that we do align with the work of the department, because when groups out there that are already working in their classrooms or organizations, this helps them mend and incorporate, not have to start over in a lot of ways. So that's wonderful. Okay, next we hear from Dr. Dakin, and we're really excited. As I said, she had such a big hand in our RFP and resource guide, and she's going to walk you through it.
Okay, thank you so much, Donna. And so this is really exciting. This is like the Christmas day for us, those of us who have been working on this project. I just want to say, just so you all on the call know, this work started back in April with a group of about 30 or 40 folks who all sat down and said, what can this look like? So when I say that there's been lots of hands in here guiding this with the same goal, what is that goal? Developing readers and writers, right? This is why it's a literacy grant. You know, it's interesting because I think about the piece of COVID. I know that we're all changed up with COVID. Everyone on this call is impacted by COVID. Our students, our early learners are really impacted by COVID. I often think about my teacher friends who have a commute. I have a 40-minute commute to work on a daily basis, and I always think this is where the best ideas come up. When you're driving, you're thinking. And I have often said this to folks, you can't tell me that there's a teacher that doesn't get in the car at the end of the day, drives home and says, or a teacher, a community organizer, somebody who works with children and says something to the effect of, if only I had the resources, I'd be able to do X, right? Because this is in most instances, this is what's holding back our great ideas, having these resources. That's why I'm so excited to work with this project, because this grant project is going to be able to provide resources, which is what we definitely need. I'd be willing to bet that every single person of the 70 people on this call have an idea. They already know what's innovative, what's in these areas to work on. So what I'm going to do with my time here is just go over a couple highlights, not read the RFP or the resource guide to you. That would be quite boring. It would not be a cold read because I would have practiced it first, but But what I want you to know is a couple things. There are two primary documents that will help you with this project. And when I say they were created explicitly for this project, that is the case. The purpose of both of these documents is to support your grant writing. I've seen it working at WVU, I've seen RFPs come through, and I've looked at them and I thought, do these people really not want to fund anybody? Because they're so overly complicated, overly specific, and filled with roadblocks. This you will not find in this RFP. This is why I just think that's really important for you to know that we have try to think about every single question that one would need to ask to complete an RFP. We have then taken these documents and we have shared them with at least a dozen, if not more, folks across the state, practitioners, folks in higher ed, Department of Ed, to say, please give us some feedback. Do these make sense to the groups that we're targeting? And again, I think it's worth noting because I saw a question that came up in the chat box, and I do actually want to read this part. I will read. I didn't practice it. It is cold. Here, these are the groups that are eligible to apply for these grants. It's so important because this is not a school grant. This is a school and community grant. So we have public and private schools, early care and early childhood programs, after school and summer learning programs, nonprofits, college, universities, and other literacy focused stakeholders, communities, public organizations in West Virginia. So it is open to very likely everyone on this call. So you have this chance with this grant. So as I had said, there's two documents, the RFP. This is the nuts and the bolts. These are all the areas that you need to address. And then there's the resource guide. And the resource guide is going to provide background, guidance, resources, things for you to consider when you're building the project. And I will tell you, whereas the RFP for this particular program will be done over, complete, you can file it after the grant. This resource guide, you should absolutely download, file, keep, because you will, if you're working with birth to 8, you will use this in other areas of your professional career. So I think that's important. Again, the assumption is that, and I'm sorry, because I don't know whether I should make the assumption that most people saw the RFP and the resource guide or haven't. So I'm just going to highlight some specifics. I'm going to share my screen here. Screen 2, that's me. Okay, so I am going to start like most people don't start. I'm going to give you the end of the story here. I am right now, I am in RFP page 12 because I just want you to know the information that is on this chart is exactly what's in the RFP. So if I could capture it in one chart, I think that will help you understand what the RFP is about. Now I'm also going to say, Maggie, Donna, Monica, or Jim, please interrupt or step in if you want to add here. But as Monica had mentioned, here's your musts. This is what your project must include. No ifs, ands, or buts. You must, in your proposal, identify with either a school readiness project, instructional practices and innovations, or extended learning, or a combination of those, okay? So, but you must at least identify one. And again, as Monica pointed out, do those categories sound familiar? Absolutely they do, because they are aligned with the campaign for grade level reading within the state of West Virginia. So that is first. Number 2, you must target high-risk populations of literacy learners. Now, throughout the RFP, we have identified data points on poverty, on low reading scores, and these are these school-based issues. But you may also go on to what in your work, your daily community work or school work or higher ed work, what does a high-risk population of learners look like? Is this somebody who is, located in a place of the state that is a library desert or a food desert or something to that effect? Is this an area of the state where there's a high drug or opioid problem? Excuse me. What makes this population high risk? You must identify learners birth age to 8. And somebody did say, does that mean all of them? No. You will not be able to do all of them. You will not very likely be able to have a project that spans that entire age. So your birth to 8 is a continuum. You can focus on a specific range of that. Obviously, these projects must take place in the state of West Virginia and focus on West Virginia children. In this RFP, we do explain and then unpack in the resource guide this next point, and that is that all of these projects must have at least 2 measurable outcomes. And one of those measurable outcomes must be measured in a pre-post design on students. Okay, so when I get over to the resource guide, I'm going to unpack that one a little bit. But you must identify 2 outcomes. One of those must be explicit to the students in that high-risk population that you will be working with, and one of those outcomes must be measured with an assessment of those students. Again, we've got some examples over in the resource guide. The next must is these projects must submit a 1-page intent to apply. That date should actually be January 15th. It's 2 weeks. You get a little bit, 2 weeks, a little bit. An additional 2 weeks to put that together, and that's just a 1-pager saying I intend to apply for this grant. That is required. So on January 15th, we will know who on this call, on the next call, who's watching this recording, will be applying for one of these grants. Another must is an organizational acknowledgement signature form, and that's from a director or superintendent. We need to know that the group that you're working with is supporting this grant proposal that you're submitting, and all projects must be submitted no later than February 28th. I should say, I'm looking at also in the resource guide, if the proposals are due on February 28th, you would receive a formal notification of your award on April 15th. Tax day, I think, unless it gets moved again. But so you will know, and the reason that that's really important is that some of these projects will start in the summer. So before I go on to the strongly recommended, Donna, Maggie, Jim, Monica, is there anything you want to add?
Not for me.
Okay.
A great job.
Okay. Those are the requirements. So if you're sitting there thinking about that plan that you already have in place in your head, these are the elements that you must include. So then what would we really like you to include? These are strongly recommended. The next few areas. One is a collaborative partnership with other schools, educational groups, organizations, or public or community groups. And so I think when we were thinking about this as a strongly recommend, again, thinking about 2 schools in a county, one school that is doing an innovative practice for, let's just say, extended learning. And again, this is just an example. And your school does not. And you'd like to partner with that school because school 2 would like to also take the main elements of this extended learning project and put it in that school. That's a collaborative partnership. Let's just say that you are a public library and you want to collaborate with the school in your group, the school in your county. That's a collaboration. Let's just say you're a higher ed institution and you want to collaborate with a community organization. These are the collaborative partnerships that we are looking for as a strongly recommend. I will say I hope it's okay to say this, when we're looking at these grants, you are not going to be penalized or promoted with a collaborative partnership, but this is what we're looking for this because we want groups to work together. Was that not said the right way there, Dr. DeNova?
I would just add, just to expand that explanation, a lot of people talk about collaboration, but it can't be for its own sake. It has to be towards an objective. It has to be functional. So look for partners that can bring something to an achievable end that doesn't exist already. And you made the good case that if you have school A with an exceptional program and school B doesn't, is there a way to share resources so that the same kind of extra services can be made available to a greater breadth of students? That makes sense. Always think about the reason for the collaboration, because collaboration is means to an end. That's all.
Thank you. Yes, you are right. One of the next strongly recommended, and this is both in the RFP and the resource guide, professional learning plan for teachers or providers. And we think this is really important because, quite frankly, as research is showing us, those folks, those early caregivers, those early teachers, the providers are really, their knowledge and of early literacy is quite impactful to our young children's ability to learn to read and write. So what we have said we strongly recommend is to somehow include those folks. Now, very simply, a simple way of looking at this is if you're working with first and second grade teachers, well, I'm going to work with the teachers who may already, well, who absolutely already participate in professional learning opportunities through their school and such. They're used to doing these types of things. But we also want you to look at the professionals who are working with your extended learning programs or your school readiness programs or your innovative practice programs. What is it that we can do to somehow fold their development into this project? So that's an important element that we strongly recommend for the grant. Matching funds and in-kind. This is not a requirement for the grant. This is a recommendation. If I was sitting there right now, I would be rubbing my two hands together thinking, okay, how do I get in touch with my county's Title I coordinator right now? Where's Energy Express? Where's my Energy Express person? Or maybe I should talk to my literacy coach for the campaign for grade level reading. Maybe I should talk to my principal to see what we have. So how we can make this project, build a budget for this project, and get the most bang for our buck, be awarded a $50,000 grant from this project, which is an incredible amount of money in the K-12 education world. And if this is a larger project, how can I get funds, be it funds or in-kind or cost sharing from the group that I'm collaborating with? So this we are recommending, we are not requiring. Okay, that was enough. Was that enough of a pause there? The last three recommendations. We really want you to think, well, we want you to think, and we know you are thinking about this every single day, every time you walk into the building where you're working, the impact of COVID on these children birth age 8. And I will say that in the narrative that you are to submit, there is a question that asks that particular question. So we want you to think about these things. Another strongly recommended is attending this meeting, and here you are. So you've already done that. And the PEC affiliate consulting, and I know that Dawn is going to speak about that in a couple moments. So this is the RFP, and again, I'm going to assume that you have looked at the RFP, you understand where to find the RFP, and it is certainly something that you could certainly pick up and read. What I'd rather do is spend some time on the questions which might come up, particularly around assessment. I do want to just switch over really quickly to the resource guide. And for those of you who get vertigo on scrolling, please close your eyes. So this resource guide, very simply, I am going to try to give you the 3-minute overview on the resource guide, because the first thing I want to say is that it's 60 pages long. Okay, this is where I'm saying that this is going to be something that you could use in other areas of your work. I guarantee it. The purpose of the resource guide is for idea generation, extension, confirmation. It is for you to go in and find what you are looking for to help support the project that you have in your mind. You will see that the resource guide has a ton of information and links in it when you download the guide. So I think I just want to say this very simply. The first half of the resource guide, the first 7 or 8 pages, provide general information. I'm going to give you the shortened version. We are saying literacy is important. As a very important reminder, this grant is a literacy grant. This isn't a reading grant or a writing grant. It is a literacy grant. We are looking for you to combine the two, and that might be thinking about the goals of having students being proficient readers and writers at 3rd grade. Well, clearly, if I'm working with 2-year-olds, it's going to be via oral language, right? That's my contribution to literacy. So we start off by having a couple pages on why literacy is important. Part 2 in the literacy guide demonstrates the 2019 third grade results of the General Summative Assessments and includes, there's some maps, really great visuals to really send the message of West Virginia literacy home. If you have not looked at those, I strongly recommend that you look at those and where we are at. Part 3, we talk about West Virginia and what we're doing. And what we're doing in West Virginia, we should be super proud of. From legislative policy to the Leaders of Literacy work. I should mention, this is a plug on Leaders of Literacy. If you are not following the podcasts of Leaders on Literacy, which you could find at Apple Music or wherever you find your podcasts, you should. It is the Leaders of Literacy podcast. It's one of the things I get so excited to follow and hear the new version. So you should be doing that. That group, Monica, Maggie, Luma, they do a great job with it. So you should look into that. So then comes the functional part of the resource guide. And I think that this is really important. Remember what we said, that your project has to be aligned with either school readiness, instructional practices and innovation, or extended learning, all right? So the whole bulk of this resource guide is broken down into those 3 categories. And so what you're going to find, if you know that your project is a school readiness project, you can go over to page, I think it's 11. I could be wrong. I don't want to scroll down again. You will find some documentation on national recommendations for school readiness. You will find promising practices around school readiness. And again, most of these are hot links, okay? So look at the paragraph and know that this is linked to something. And then we give this really great sampling of what's going on in the state of West Virginia in that area. This is why I'm saying, if you have your idea, this is where you could extend it or confirm your idea or find an idea, quite frankly, by what's already going on. These grant proposals should be innovative. They don't have to be novel and never done before. So that's how the middle part is broken down. And the last thing I want to say is that there's a section on assessment in this resource guide. And I know this is going to come up as a question, so maybe it will be a richer conversation when the questions actually come up. And what we have there is some selective resources that are both teacher and educator friendly about what we need to know about assessment in general, okay? And then we have a section of what the state is already doing in the way of assessments. And now most of these are summative assessments that the state is using. So there's these options. And then we have some very short descriptions on both informal and formal literacy measures that you can use. Now, I think this is a really important part. And again, I'll give you a for example. Again, we'll go with that school readiness, and you're working with 3-year-olds and you're focusing on oral language, and you think, wait, the outcome of this grant, one of my outcomes is that I am going to increase the student population's phonological awareness skills, let's say, right? That's a measurable outcome, and that's a really good outcome too, if we want to improve oral literacy, which we know eventually will impact the student's reading ability. How do I measure that? Well, you might want to come over to the resource guide and say, all right, the CTOP, the Comprehensive Test of Phonological Processing, I think it is. I can't think of the second P. You might say, well, we don't know that test, but in this grant, we could put in the grant budget money to purchase this test that we can, this assessment rather, that we could then administer to our students. Here's what we don't want in this grant. We don't want people to be assessing for assessing purposes. We don't want folks to have to learn a new assessment. Although I will say this, the informal and formal ones that on this list are learnable. And on top of that, as Donna's going to speak about, we have assistance in this area. So if you're just not sure, you know your goal, but you're just not sure how you can measure that, because that's one requirement. One requirement, we must measure student outcome on one of these. We can help you with that. We could help you identify those. And so the last thing I want to say, because I want to open this up to the discussion, the interesting part is we've got this appendix filled with a glossary, maps, SES data, all types of resources. Again, most of which are hot links. And so these two documents that are really designed to help you understand this grant and really to help you get funded.
Excellent. Allison, thank you so much. And I know that several people, even some of our state board members that have read the resource guide, said it's like a how-to textbook. It's really a wonderful reference for so many projects that they're working on. So we hope everybody feels the same way about that. We do want to open it up for discussion, but Maggie and I just want to talk to you 1 minute about the technical support that Allison alluded to. Today is one, technical assistance Zoom, and we're so pleased to have all of you with us. And we're having another one December 2nd. I see somebody said, can we come back again the second time? Surely you can, or you can listen to this recording. Or the other thing that you can do, which I think is kind of neat, is you can have one-to-one technical assistance with you or your team, with one of us or several of us, and maybe even other outside assessment experts or whatever you need. So there's a form to fill out, and I'm going to ask Maggie to bring up our website so you can see where it is, and she'll talk you through it. And also there's an intent to apply form that Maggie will show you that's due January 15th, just so we know who all does intend to apply and that we can continue to work with you. Okay, Maggie.
All right, can everybody see my screen? Can you see the Sparking Early Literacy Growth page? Perfect.
That's
Right,
PEC's
so
website, right? Right. Okay.
Yes, and I already dropped that link in the chat, so y'all should have it, but I'll send it out again in any communications we do after this event, and I'll probably drop it in the chat again before we leave. So you'll have it a couple times over by the time we're done here. Okay, so we tried to put together a really comprehensive page that would help you all out going through this process. And we'll keep updating this as things change. I don't think we should have very many changes going forward, but we do have all of our key dates on here, and we'll have links to watch sessions after they're over, like this one today. If you want to come back and watch it later, we'll have a link to watch it here. Then if you'd like to come to our second technical assistance session, we will also have registration, and in the future we'll have a watch the session after it's over button here. And we've already got we're calling it a letter of intent form, but we've really just boiled it down into a form instead of a letter. So you all can submit that. It's going to be due on January 15th, but you can submit that right here. And we're also going to have our electronic application form down here below. And if you would like to request one-on-one assistance, you can actually just email me or email our PEC email, which I'll also drop in the chat, or you can submit your letter of intent right here. Go ahead and put your tentative information in, and then when you go ahead and submit that request, you can click yes, I'm interested in receiving assistance, and we'll be in touch with you to schedule that. All right, I think that's everything on the site, but if you all have specific questions about this, you can ask them now, or you can go ahead and get in touch with us after this as well, and we can walk you through it a little bit more.
Thank you, Maggie. Oh, go ahead.
You had just said that the letter of intent is due on the 15th, but the paperwork says that it's due on the 31st.
Of December, right? We changed that because people were asking us to after the holidays. So you get more time, and we'll update all that.
Okay, so it is the 31st then?
No, it's January. It's the January 15th.
Oh, January 15th. Okay, thank you.
So you have extra time. People were asking for it after the holidays.
Oh, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've extended that deadline, and you'll actually, if we do change any other deadlines, which we do not anticipate doing, you'll see the most updated deadlines on the website. So that's the most updated, accurate source for those.
Okay, let's go into our questions now. And I know that Allison, and thank you for this, has been replying to a lot of them that just were straightforward. But we have some others, V and Maggie. Do you want to call out what we need to answer that hasn't been answered?
Oh, first it looks like we have a hand up. Arij, do you still have a question? I see your little raised hand in the chat.
No, thank you. You answered my question already.
Oh,
Great.
great.
Thank you.
I'm
Okay.
so sorry. One of the questions that came in, and I'm sorry, I was trying to just clear the chat box. Somebody had asked, are we limited to one application per county? And that answer is no.
Mhm. V, what else do you see that hasn't been answered?
Hey, Donna, this is Jim. I think it might be helpful to recap what's been asked and answered for the rest of the audience.
Okay, great. Let's go clear up.
Like that last question, Allie. Appreciate it.
Okay. Allison, which ones did
Right.
you answer? Because they're all mixed in with the registration for some people.
Okay, so I answered the question about the counties because again, what we're not counting and we're not a gatekeeper, one per county. We suspect if we've got great innovative projects coming out of any given county, the more the merrier. And I think we this is why when we think about the collaborative nature of this grant, it's important because again, I read that list. We do anticipate receiving grants from after school programs and early care providers and schools and libraries. But if these groups if you know the folks in your county and you can get together, this might be helpful. That's not to say that's the way you have to submit them. So more than one. The question I also replied to is, so if you have a grant proposal that has multiple components with multiple age range of students, is there are there two different applications? So there's one application, and the application is going to be the narrative aspect of it is how you could describe that. So if you have that project that has, octopus arms on it, right? There's all it, covers it all. That's great. Can you define that or describe that in the proposal? And do we have the two outcomes? So you could have a range of groups, or it could be an innovative practice and an extended learning. So you could combine the priorities, combine the age. What are the outcomes? And we have one proposal. So I don't know if that helps. That might be one of those specific ones that should be unpacked with some one-on-one, because maybe you actually have two proposals there.
Also, Katie answered specific problems. She asked which problems you want us to address, and you answered that, Allison.
I'm sorry.
Innovative early literacy, the state's general summative assessment of third grade is shining a light on the dismal scores. And then you also talked about backward mapping, the grant focusing
I'm
on
sorry.
birth through 8 years old in ways in which a stakeholder can contribute, and developing readers and writers. That's great.
Right. So what is the focus? The focus here is that we need to look at our birth to 8 and overall literacy in the state of West Virginia. That's the problem. And so I think the RFP and the project and PEC is challenging in a positive way, not challenging you all to say is what's an innovative way to address this. It might be very slim. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Monica.
No, I'm sorry, Allison. So I just wanted to add one other thing that the challenge, as you presented, is really unique, especially during this time of COVID, as the question will present itself in the RFP, because we all know, I mean, if you're on this call, you likely know something or perhaps a whole lot about child development. And you know that you have to think about the whole child. So literacy development doesn't just happen in isolation. So those innovative practices for school readiness might look like something with social and emotional development as well, or might look like considering children's physical development and how you link those to literacy. I mean, those transformative practices would definitely be something that would be, applicable with this process as well. One other thing I want to mention is the question about the multiple grants per county. Absolutely, definitely doable. The RFP does require, and I know that Allison went over this, the signature of those needed individuals. So you're going to want to make sure if you are planning to do something with a school, for example, you want to get the principal on board, you want to get the teachers on board, you want to also make sure that as a courtesy the superintendent is notified. So I know that many of you on the call are not necessarily with a school system. Many of you are. That's the beauty of these partnerships, is that for transparency's sake, you just want to make sure all your partners are included and everyone signs off that this is a great idea and something that we're going to shoot for and definitely try to do with this grant process. So thank you for letting me interject, Allison. Sorry about that.
We just got 2 more questions in the chat box. So the first question is there a timeline for the grant? For example, if the program starts in June, would it run for 1 school year? So is there a length requirement?
Can I comment on that?
Yeah.
As a funder? No, there's not. I would like the logic of the project to dictate the timeline for implementation. We are making this round of grants early next year. We'll be making another round in the following year. But we're interested in the idea. And if you feel that it takes X amount of time to implement, or implement to the point that there's can be an observable change part of your assessment, I say show the timeline that makes the most sense. And I would also add, make very liberal use of the individual consultation because, you know, from a foundation perspective, we're interested in ideas and we want to help cultivate a promising and maybe untested idea. So let the experts around evaluation and program design help you shape a really cool idea into a manageable project. That's not a shortcoming. That's just, you surround yourself with people with special gifts. And by the way, evaluation is one of them, because the evaluation should match the project design. So they're not going to be the same for everyone. I want, at the end of the day, to show which promising practices showed rate of change, that showed improvement. So please make use of that service in the preparation of your letter and then proposal.
And I'm sorry, Jim, can I just add in there to the group? The example that I gave about the formal CTOP assessment was just an example. I don't want anyone to think that they need to go find an assessment that they're not familiar with to use. But if you wanted to, that's certainly an allowable expense in the budget. You may choose to use what your program is already using or what a collaborative partner could suggest. So what we want to see is growth, and when we look at the piece on assessment, you know, what we're looking for, how do I say it this way? What we're not looking for, how about that, is attendance, is things like, you know, the students really enjoyed the experience. We know that they will enjoy the experience. That is great. And that is certainly a great observation of success of a grant, right? What they call that the happiness quotient. Did people leave happy? They did. So it was good. And that's great. But the assessment component here is really to look at growth. But that could be found in something that your organization or group is already using. But again, if you have questions about that, that would be, again, one of those nice uses of the one-on-one.
Yeah, good point.
So the second question, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. The second question is, can you give us any more information on the criteria of choosing grants? Assuming this is clearly competitive, what are the criteria or components that will score the highest choice of being awarded?
Well,
Allie, are you?
Getting
Yeah, I'm
there.
sorry.
I think there are
This-
criteria in the RFP.
Yeah, she's getting it.
I am getting there. I'm sorry. Close your eyes, everybody. Well, I think that the first place I would look at is the required components. Okay, so to be competitive, to be considered, and this is what I said at the beginning of the conversation, there's some grants out there, particularly like those from the federal government, you have to wonder whether they actually really want someone to get it, because the musts are so insane. This is not the case here. So they are competitive. What we're looking for first is the required components, and they're competitive. Yeah. So I would say you would be looking at the required components as the criteria. We'll be looking at the outcomes. Do we have a scoring rubric to share with you at this point? We do not.
Let me add to that, because just in general, because at the end of the day, there's going to be a review committee. We're going to be looking at proposals, and I'm hoping to get compelling projects in all three areas of school readiness, instruction, and extended day. The overriding desire, though, is for an idea that responds to a very, very specific problem, so that we can have some piloting of what could be changed in the dynamic of preparing kids for higher level reading, that is getting at some of my original point about disparity.
Ugh.
So back to my example, if kids are reading at an accelerated pace and in the 4-year-old program, and all of a sudden they derail in kindergarten, there is a point of intervention that suggests that something different can take place in kindergarten to help sustain that growth. Describe it. Come up with an idea to change instructional patterns or student configurations or professional development. I don't know the answer, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the selection process, it's going to be for something innovative that addresses one of those specific points of need, or that is much more discrete and specific than all kids need. Because there is a lot going on for all kids in the state. We want to target those areas where kids are not doing as well as they could. When we looked at some of the mapping data, and that's why I encourage you to look at the maps, there are elementary schools in the same region, poor, under-resourced, and elementary school A, kids are reading at like 85% proficiency rate, school B, 25%. And it sort of challenges the myth that well-resourced communities with a lot of institutions and a lot of money will do better than those who are not. That's been debunked if you just look at that discrete data. Something is happening in those really high-achieving schools that is not happening in underachieving schools in the same area of economic distress and rural isolation. So let's find those practices and elevate them. That's what we're looking for, the fresh ideas. If that makes sense.
Thank you, Jim. V, do I see another new one?
There's one about, is this a first come, first served basis?
I guess
What's that? Say
I
that
have
again.
to clarify that. Does that mean whoever gets it in first has a better chance? No, it's just, when the applications are due, on February 28th, be judged by the team and the rubric. I hope if I misunderstood that, let me know. I think we have somebody also with their hand up. Don't we, Maggie?
Yeah.
Favorite
So,
menu.
Maureen, if you haven't had a chance to get your question answered yet.
No, I haven't been able to get my question answered. I can have a couple questions. First question is that there seems to be a pretty large scale, the number of children that we're trying to impact with this grant, and I totally respect that. But what about like daycare facilities and providers? I mean, like, of course, we would not have as many children that we would be serving as a school or a center or places like that. Are we able to apply for this grant?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and so is there any, like,
large scale is the scale of the project is not as relevant as the creativity of the idea. We're looking for demonstrations that we can hopefully take to the legislature, to the policymakers to scale at a later date. So if there's a really interesting small scale project that is quite different and quite innovative, in my estimation, that would trump numbers of kids.
okay, and so then if I were to, like, say, collaborate with my local library here and try to, put something together with them where we work in unison in some sort of a project together, would that work? Would that be something that would, like a daycare facility and a library that are working, they would have one scope of thing that would be more far reaching than a daycare facility that would be more specific to the same children on a daily basis? And is that the octopus somebody was referring to? Like, that would be one application?
Yeah,
Allie's octopus.
yeah.
That, Maureen, that would be one application. And then you also have to think about the school where those children in that daycare are being fed into, right? So maybe there's a school partnership there too. So when we say collaborative partnership, I mean, I think the library idea is great, but getting the school on board, the more the merrier there with that.
I just know that our library also struggles financially. I try to contribute to the library as much as I can, but I know that the resources are just so limited for that as well. And so this would be something that could, work together on a couple things before. My last question is that as far as signatures, like, I own my daycare facility, would I sign my own papers? I mean, because I knew that was something that Monica, I believe, was talking about.
Yeah, this is Monica. Again, that's a really great question. So I think it depends on who you're collaborating with. And so if you submit on behalf of your center only, then obviously as the director, you would sign off on that. But once you engage in a partnership with the library, you would also want to get the signature of the person in charge of that library or that library system. And then, definitely if you partner with other childcare centers or a school, you would want to get those signatures as well. But if you are the sole entity that submits, then you would be able to definitely sign off on that.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
I'm sure I'll be back with more.
We had a quick request that if you're not speaking, please mute, because there's just a little bit of feedback. Thank you. V, any other questions? I'm not in there.
I actually got 2 questions today when I was on the phone with a couple different librarians, and one of them was, is it possible to collaborate across counties?
Yes.
That's a great idea. I said yes.
Absolutely.
And then the second question that I got was, is priority granted to projects that are easily translatable from in-person to hybrid or virtual, given the nature of the pandemic and the uncertainty?
That's That's a really great question. Donna, do you want to talk about that or do you want me to?
Go right ahead.
Okay. So I honestly don't, we haven't had a great deal of discussion about that other than the fact that we know we want the applicants to consider COVID-19 implications and how it's impacting children. So if that looks differently, if that looks like something that would be provided via a hybrid model or a virtual model, you know, the problem with virtual and young learners is that young children are not independent learners. We know that. We know that, I mean, I have a 14-year-old and she's not an independent learner. So some of you might be able to relate if you have children who are a little older. But seriously, the younger the child, the stronger the partnership you must have with the family. So I don't mean to speak negatively about virtual instruction because we know that many families have chosen that for their child due to the pandemic. I think that what we're looking for are those innovative, potentially replicable practices that may or may not include a component that would be considered a hybrid or a virtual model. Is that a fair assumption, team?
Yes.
What,
Well said.
could I comment on that too? Because we're looking for unique responses to unique problems, I would say to the applicant, make the case. Why? What problem do you want to address and why is this important? If it doesn't match the developmental level, that's part of the conversation. If it's in response to an anticipated hybrid, a permanent hybrid learning environment, make the case. This applies more to older kids, I think, not necessarily, but we're seeing across the country community learning hubs or micro schools. I mean, they're nodes. They're the same thing that go by different names. That are really small congregate clusters of students who get extra tutorial as well as internet access, and they're popping up in community centers, they're popping up in libraries, they're popping up in people's living rooms. The point is, because of COVID, they're being catalyzed. I think moving forward, we're going to see very unique models of community-based organizations and public schools that have worked side by side historically, but are going to be working in a more integrated fashion. That's just one scenario. But I use it as an illustration because think about what would be a creative response to a particular problem and why you're using it. So it's not virtual or not virtual. It's not a prescription from the funder or the committee. It's what you think makes the most sense and why.
Thank you, Jim. That's great. I see a hand up too.
Title I schools, yeah.
Maureen. Is she there? Okay.
You already.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Hand up. Okay. More questions, V, coming in new, one that just came in.
Yes. Would quantitative data be required for the measurable outcomes? Could qualitative analysis and narrative reporting of findings work for the grant's measurable outcomes requirements?
Monica, I know we've talked a lot to you about this.
Sure. When possible, quantitative data would be easiest to digest, I guess we could say. However, we know that young children, it's difficult to do quantitative analysis on young children specifically. So, or with them specifically, potentially, or especially because of the reliability issue with young children. So I think that we could absolutely look at qualitative analysis and narrative reporting of findings. That would be something, if you were really interested in doing, I would encourage you to reach out to us and let's have a little deeper conversation about that, about what your thinking is, and maybe we could do a follow-up one-on-one, Stephanie, and look at, again, it's not about are you doing this or are you not doing this? It's about the impacts and what it means for children. So if you're able to make that case that what you're doing is showing an impact on children, then, you know, I think that's something we could definitely look at.
And can I also add to that? Just as a reminder, there are 2 learning outcomes, and clearly when after funded, when you're reporting, one of those outcomes what we're requiring is a pre-post design of growth on the participants, who would be the children, and if you want, the parents, the caregivers, the teachers, you know, the other group is the or part, and or. But we absolutely want to see that. So I think Monica is right. If you could be specific and have a conversation with us to see what that would look like. But I'm trying to think of the qualitative. And certainly it can be done in a pre-post design in a qualitative analysis, but I think that's one thing that we'd have to talk about. But and that's why we have 2 outcomes, and we're requiring the measurement on one of the 2.
And I think it brings up, it's a good chance to emphasize the one-to-one technical assistance can certainly be customized. And you can even mention, gee, I'd like to talk to Monica and Allison about that, or whomever. And somebody else asked that in the chat room, and I answered it too, that you can customize your one-to-one. Anything else? Dee, did you see any other questions?
I have not. No new ones.
Okay. And Maureen, we decided didn't have the hand up. Anybody else, though? I mean, I know we're nearing the end, but we're certainly willing to stay on and keep talking to anybody.
If I can just make a general comment, I know this is repetitive, but this is how I learn, by having someone repeat something 72 times to me. But start with the idea, and then, or start with the problem, why you are planning what you're planning to address that problem. And then lastly, how do you measure what you want to accomplish? Make that sequence of events customized to the problem, the intervention that matches, and the evaluation that matches. And that's why we start with the individual consultation, because we don't want to address evaluation in a vacuum. It would be like saying, I have a medical suggestion. Would you say penicillin? And you want to sort of know what the issue, what the problem is, before you say, oh yeah, penicillin, across the board. So, you know, let's use a bit of a medical model when we think about it. What is the specific condition you want to change? And why are you picking this particular intervention? And how does it match that problem? And then how do you know that intervention is working? And how do you know? You know, the evaluation system should really be teased out, because everybody knows what they observe, and you know what's working. What are you observing that you know is working or not working, and let that be the foundation for how you shape your evaluation method. So
thank you, Jim.
Just a suggestion.
And if I can also add, as long as there's no other questions. I'm sorry, is that me with the feedback? Maybe not. Okay. Sometimes I think you might also just already look in your existing medicine cabinet, right? Taking a practice that you're already doing, and how do you turn that, how can you convert that into something more innovative? And again, maybe this is an extended learning or an extended day project, where the focus is reading fluency, right? And the kids are doing well with it. But what would really be great is if you had a second set of volunteers and you required parents to attend, right? And another group worked with parents, and the parents got the same that the children got, and then they came back together. So again, I'm not saying that that would be the fundable project. I was trying to think of an example of something that's working, that's good, that you could make it better or more innovative, or something for which the roadblock has been resources. And so, but it's innovation. And I guess maybe another way of saying this is it what we're doing everyday practice, and then what makes it different? And again, I think what Jim had said at the beginning of the conversation, what makes this scalable? You know, what we're the second part, I think West Virginia, Donna could speak to this. West Virginia PEC is looking for innovative projects to make recommendations for policy within the state. So there's a second aspect of the grant, and that's also written about in the RFP, that is one of the outcomes for the project for funding your projects.
This is Maureen. I do have another question. I'm sorry. I know that on the intent to apply, that there's a place you can request technical assistance, but is there any contact information for you guys prior to that to try to brainstorm, like for Allison, Monica, or Maggie, or, you know?
Can we, we're going to send a follow-up note out, email out, Maggie, and we can include all the email addresses. That works.
We'll absolutely send an email out to all of you after this session, just so you have all of our email addresses, depending on who you need to get in touch with. And I'm going to go ahead and pop my email in the chat as well. So if you have any immediate questions after this, before we get that follow-up email out, you can go ahead and get in touch with me.
And may I also add to Maureen and those who are on the call, do not wait until January 15th to request technical assistance, because what you're submitting on January 15th is you are saying to us, our project's pretty much done, here's what it is, a small summary. So if you wait until that long, then you'll miss the opportunity from today until then. So you certainly don't want to do that. And then you're also very welcome to attend the next session in December, because that group will also ask a different group of questions that might be insightful for you and your project.
Good idea. Well, you're muted, Jim.
I muted because there was interference, but I don't know if it was coming from you or not. So if someone says, I really want some help right now on, you know, designing this thing or evaluation, can they contact, do they go on the website and say, who do you have to help me with this? Who can I talk to? Is that
Absolutely.
how it works? Okay.
That's how it works in the form that Maggie created. Plus, like she said, she's going to send out this follow-up email with everybody's email. So you may be, all of us may be getting it. We definitely want it to be
Stop
easy.
earlier rather than later.
That's right.
Follow Allie's
That's exactly right.
suggestion.
That's right. This has been wonderful, and thank you all for the questions and the interaction, and certainly from what I can see in the chat, you found it helpful, and I thank all of our wonderful technical assistance team that addressed most of the questions and are behind the scene with Maggie and V2. Please remember that Maggie here probably very quickly will be sending you a follow-up email with all kinds of contact, connecting you back to our website for the short form to fill out, the intent to apply, and of course the RFP and resource. And we look forward to your applications. And
Yep.
I know as a classroom teacher, and sometimes it seems overwhelming to get all these things completed, but that's why we're making the focus of this centered around technical assistance. Will help in any way. So thank you very much. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you all.
Benedict. Thanks, Peck.
Thanks, Beck.
I love it.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you guys so
everybody.
much.
Great.
Really was. Gosh, really good.
Well, that's terrific. I think we're gonna get a lot of applications. It's a great grant.